Valentina Gomez is hoping to run as a Republican candidate in Texas for the US Congress. Her platform? Rancid Islamophobia. Now, it's not her first time running for political office, however. In 2024, she came bottom of the race to be the Republican candidate for the Missouri Secretary of State, running on a platform that saw her attack an LGBTQ inclusive library books with a literal flamethrower. Don't believe me? Watch this.
This is what I will do to the growing books when I become Secretary of State.
Let's go. Welcome to the main event. Applying pressure, but I promise I ain't make it down.
These books come from Missouri Public Library. When I'm in office, they will burn.
Gomez also told voters in Missouri, quote, "Don't be weak and gay." A sure vote winner there. Now, having failed in Missouri, she's trying again in Texas. And this time it's the Muslims she's targeting. She's also put out another flamethrower video. In this one, it's a Quran that she set alight. We're not going to play that, obviously. But here's the kind of thing that she likes to say.
Texas, I've officially filed to become your next congresswoman. So the choice is yours. Vote for me so we can kick every dirty Muslim out of Texas. Save your daughters from getting raped by Mohammed and protect our soldiers from getting murdered in broad daylight. Let me be very clear. We will make Texas the worst place for groomers, terrorist Muslims, pedophiles, and illegals to live in, so help me God. For me, this is just an election, but for you and your daughter, this is your life. Because Texas has only gotten more Muslim under these weak Republicans. New York City already fell to Islam, so did Michigan and Minnesota, and you're next in line. If Texas falls to Islam, it's simply because you didn't vote correctly. God bless you all.
Now, look, Valentina Gomez is a nutter. That doesn't mean she won't end up in Congress, obviously, but it does mean that perhaps people should be a little more responsible about platforming her. Enter Piers Morgan, who didn't get that memo. This is from his show last night.
But as you speak, you see, I'm just seeing a brazen Islamophobe. And people say that phrase doesn't exist. It doesn't. And I'm sure you find it funny, but I think you can make perfectly pertinent points about what's happened here without descending into such vile hatred towards an entire religion. And there are 5 million Muslims in the United States. Why would you want to categorize them in such a grotesque manner?
Oh, and those 5 million Muslims should definitely go back to their 56 Muslim nations. And let's get something very clear right now in your little show, Piers. I don't fear the groomers. I don't fear the pedophiles. I don't fear the corrupt politicians. And I definitely do not fear the dirty Muslims.
Very interesting. Piers Morgan, a man who's just released a book called Woke's Not Dead, going, "You're a vile bigot, a hateful Islamophobe." It's pretty woke, Piers. Weird how he's happy to have her on the show, though. Come on my show, you hateful Islamophobe. Luckily, there were other guests there to counter Gomez.
We should be clear about the fact. I mean, sure, Valentina is just a bigot, plain and simple, engages in the worst kinds of bigotry imaginable. But it's worth noting that she's fundamentally un-American because the American Constitution says that you cannot discriminate against people based on religion. That is pretty clear. And so she's engaging in an anti-American campaign in the name of protecting America, which is just irony beyond imagination. So yes, she's a charlatan. She doesn't know what she's talking about. You can tell by looking at her that her IQ hovers around room temperature. To me, the real scandal is not engaging with her directly because she's beneath taking seriously. But the problem is with the GOP, that you have a major party in this country having a candidate running under its flagship, engaging in this kind of really incredibly hateful, incendiary rhetoric, and they do nothing about it. We've seen it with the dissent with Donald Trump himself, with the lawlessness that he has brought to the table and the corruption that he's allowed to get away with, without the party really standing up and putting country before party and before president. And you can see that slippery slope now leading to this level, where you have just a complete hateful clown like this person representing that party without the party objecting to it.
Dahlia, I think obviously that last point there is very strong. It's very easy for us, or at least very easy for me, especially as a white person, to sit here and laugh at the crazy Islamophobe, right? But I'm sure for everyone out there, the real scary part is that this is closer to becoming normalized. So what's your take?
First of all, I think it's not funny, but it kind of is. It's ironic, let's say, to use the phrase dirty Muslims when Muslims famously clean 5 times a day. Like, I actually think we all could enter a more Muslim state of mind when it comes to personal hygiene. And I feel that way every time I get onto the central line. But anyway, I feel very conflicted often about giving a woman like this airtime. Because why has Piers Morgan got her on his show? Because she makes good TV, because she says shocking things. She's going to stir up debate. She's going to get the clicks. It's rage bait. And it's not because this is someone who actually represents like a significant part of the electorate. It's not because she has done anything to deserve having a platform in mainstream political media. It's because she knows how to play the social media game, and she knows that rage bait is the fastest way to notoriety. This is just a woman who is running in an election. The last time she ran, which was for Missouri Secretary of State, she pulled many of these same antics, and she received less than 9% of the vote in the GOP primary, meaning that amongst registered Republican voters, she came sixth. So this kind of brings me back to some of the points I made earlier about the tendency to overinflate controversial far-right figures because they do well on media, without understanding that this can lead to quite scary political consequences down the road. Because in a sense, it's the Trump, Farage, Bolsonaro playbook of getting far-right politics into the mainstream right. You put them on a show, you put on the circus, and producers will come to that circus, will buy tickets to that circus because the circus sells. And then eventually that kind of speech becomes very normalized. And what happens is the political spectrum warps as a result, because the political spectrum is not, it's a construct. What we consider center, left, far left, right, far right, these aren't really just a set of fixed principles that remain fixed over time. They are adaptable, they change, they're in flux depending on context. And when you start to overinflate someone who is at the moment, in rhetoric at least, a fringe character, and you overham her, you then establish a dynamic where this becomes the new right-wing voice. And it happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it reminds me of how David Cameron in 2015 referred to Nigel Farage and UKIP as, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something like, a bunch of fruitcakes. In 2015, David Cameron felt so emboldened that the prospect of Nigel Farage becoming the new face of the centre right was so preposterous that he could disparage them in public forums. That would be, a Conservative Party leader would never do that now, because reform, the entire political spectrum has been shifted to the right, because people like Nigel Farage have been overinflated in our media, and their diagnosis of the problems in society have been normalized. And this is how the far right of yesterday becomes the center right of tomorrow. And it also has another effect, which is by having her come on and sort of be scolded by Piers Morgan because of her antics, her rhetoric, the kind of the spectacle that she puts on, the language that she's willing to use. It kind of lets the extremists who are in power currently, because let's remember, she's an extremist, but she's a powerless extremist at the moment. But there are extremists in power who are executing the fundamental principles of her vision. They're maybe not going as far as she would want to go, and maybe they're not couching it in quite the extreme language and dehumanizing language that she is using. But when we're talking about chasing Muslims out of America, we had the Muslim ban under the last Trump presidency. We have Muslims being picked off the street by ICE and disappeared for their political views. When it comes to the what she calls banning the groomers and the pedophiles, by which she means queer people, we already have an executive order from Trump which bans federal funding to any education in schools that is seen to be based on gender ideology or what they call discriminatory equity ideology, which is hilarious, putting discriminatory and equity in the same sentence there. But in the principles of what she is arguing, much of that is actually taking place in one version or another by people who actually wield state power. But Piers Morgan doesn't bring those people on and hold them to account. If anything, we saw him buttering Donald Trump up during the last campaigning phase. And so there's this kind of double-edged, that there's this situation by overinflating someone like her because she makes good media, which is that you let off the hook the people who are already paving the way for her vision to become reality, and you also further stretch the remit of what becomes considered right-wing politics, legitimate right-wing politics, in the mainstream political sphere. So I think this is a case of someone, Piers Morgan and his producers, perhaps putting the desire for clicks and virality and rage bait above what is actually politically responsible, and refusing to learn from what we have seen happen in the case of people like Bolsonaro, Trump, Farage, who began as basically media influencers and have now become, presidents and potentially future prime ministers.